Welcome to Washington, a city that looks like an armed encampment and feels permanently on edge. This afternoon, a sudden security lockdown after a fire near the Capitol building that turned out to be a false alarm. But the alerts could not put preparations for the inauguration on hold for long. In the last few hours, rehearsals for Joe Biden's big moment have been back up and running. And as the removal vans arrived at the White House, no word from President Trump, but the First Lady signed off with this farewell message.
To focus on what unites us, to raise above what divides us, to always choose love over hatred.
Meanwhile, the president's outgoing top law officer spoke out for the first time to condemn the rioters who stormed the Capitol.
Most people are exercising their First Amendment rights, but there's a substantial group, obviously, that went far beyond that and broke into the Capitol and tried to interfere with the proceedings, and that's unacceptable.
Also on News at 10 tonight. At home, the vaccine program accelerates. Now it'll be the turn of the over 70s as each jab brings us closer to freedom.
Well, I want to see the grandchildren and my sons. It means a heck of a lot.
But hospital admissions appear to be getting younger and younger.
52, 52, 52, 46. These are my grandparents on the ward here. These are school-aged children's mums and dads on this ward.
It was tough. It was really tough. And they were great. Absolutely great. They kept me going.
And back here in America, the woman who is about to make history, incoming Vice President Kamala Harris.
She's going to be inspiring every single woman that didn't feel like she can make it, that she will have hope and she will be the light.
From Washington, this is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening from Washington, a city on edge in a country on the cusp of change. This week, Inauguration Week, will be the most momentous since Joe Biden won that presidential election at the start of November. After what happened here nearly 2 weeks ago with the storming of the Capitol, it has the potential to be the most violent since then, too. The army, the police, the politicians are frankly so jittery about any kind of trouble that smoke from a nearby camp for homeless people disrupted the rehearsal for Mr. Biden's big day. For a time, the Capitol was locked down by the very police that failed to stop the siege by President Trump's supporters. He was nowhere to be seen today, although his wife was. The main activity at the White House was the coming and the going of removal lorries.
The final rehearsals are underway for the great ceremony and pageantry that surround the transfer of power in this country. We are now less than 43 hours from the moment that the wild ride that has been the Trump presidency is over, and the troops are readying for a new commander-in-chief. But amid all of this, there remains grave concern about security. Some military officials worried about the loyalty of some soldiers amid fears of an insider attack. That anxiety was clear when a security alert this morning led to a lockdown of Congress.
Everyone's running from the Capitol grounds,
with smoke rising in the background. That fire proved unrelated. But band members were evacuated, and the city remains on edge. FBI agents have been levelling fresh charges against the insurrectionists who we filmed storming Congress on January the 6th. Bobby Geiswein, seen here heading into the heart of the Capitol, is accused of multiple offences. So too is Riley Williams, who we watched shepherding people up a staircase towards the office of the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. She is also being investigated over whether she tried to sell Pelosi's laptop to the Russians. At the White House, in these final chaotic hours of the Trump era, the First Lady tonight broke her silence with an opening line that is the understatement of the decade.
The past 4 years have been unforgettable. As Donald and I conclude our time in the White House, I think of all of the people I have taken home in my heart and their incredible stories of love, patriotism, and determination. Be passionate in everything you do, but always remember that violence is never the answer and will never be justified.
Tonight, her husband's successor was briefly glimpsed ahead of his move to Washington.
Sir, how's the speech training going? Have you finished your speech?
And the Vice President-elect spoke of the immense pride she will feel at noon on Wednesday.
I am very much looking forward to be sworn in as the next Vice President of the United States, and I will walk there to that moment proudly with my head up and my shoulder back.
America's capital now resembles a military encampment. Washington is witnessing the most extensive security operation since the Civil War.
Joe Biden will be arriving here in just a few hours' time. And if he looks at the scale of these military deployments, it will be abundantly clear just how precarious the security situation appears to be.
Those planning the inauguration ceremony on the National Mall are hoping that a display of patriotism, even without crowds, will send out across America a unifying message. Robert Moore, News at 10, Washington.
And Emma joins me from the streets here in Washington. Now, Emma, I know we're showing people these pictures, but it's quite hard to sort of give people an idea of just how bizarre this city is and just the extent of the sort of military occupation of it, really. But what do you think is the real nature of the security threat? How seriously are the authorities taking it?
Tom, there seems to be a real anxiety about whether there is a risk of some kind of insider job on this, and that is leading to this incredible vetting process of the 25,000 National Guard members by the military and also by the FBI, such as the scale they've had to bring the FBI in because they can't get through that many people in the amount of time they have available to them. The acting Defence Secretary was asked about this today, and he said that he didn't have any specific intelligence about any kind of insider job and that he was just being extremely cautious. However, you would have to say that this is an incredibly big operation to be trying to investigate at this level. And I think probably the events back at the Capitol 10 days ago are weighing heavy on people's minds because there were a number of military and former military personnel involved, as well as others from law enforcement.
OK, Emma, for now, thank you very much indeed. Now, as for who was involved in the storming of the Capitol, one of President Trump's former attorney generals, Bill Barr, told us today there were similarities with Islamist extremists in the sense of alienation and psychological problems. As for their motivation, he's pretty clear that persistent challenging of November's election result helped ignite the violence, without mentioning any names, of course.
He was one of the most important figures in the Trump administration. And this is Bill Barr's first interview since the storming of the US Capitol 12 days ago. As Attorney General, he was a loyal supporter of the office of President and of the man inside it. But on the issue of the legitimacy of November's election result, they differed. And he says those false concerns helped to encourage the violence.
Perhaps the debate about the integrity of the election was the final straw.
I think that was the thing that precipitated the riots on the Hill. Now, I think it's always important to remember that most people are exercising their First Amendment rights. But there was a substantial group, obviously, that went far beyond that and broke into the Capitol and tried to interfere with the proceedings, and that's unacceptable. I'm sad to see, but not surprised in a way, to see the kind of violence we saw on Capitol Hill. I consider it despicable, and I was not Attorney General. I had already left office when that occurred, but I felt that they should move very quickly to disperse that Democrat, regardless of which side of the political spectrum is involved. We just cannot tolerate violence interfering with the processes of government.
Out of office, but always a lawyer, he chose his words carefully, not naming Donald Trump and stopping short of saying he incited the rioters.
I'll leave it to the people who are looking into the genesis of this to say whether incitement was involved. I don't know if I'd use the word inevitable, but I think that when you start suppressing free speech, when people lose confidence in the media, and also when they lose faith in the integrity of elections, you're going to have some people resort to violence.
And after years dealing with the cases of Islamic State group terrorists, he sees some parallels here.
There is obviously some commonality because many of the people that can get involved in this are people who have problems, psychological problems or, problems with their socialization, shall we say, alienation. So to that extent, sort of the raw material of extremism may be similar.
He's offered some answers, but what next for the violent supporters of his former boss is a question for another presidential term. Rohit Khatri, News at 10, Washington.
And Robert, of course, joins me here now as the sun literally sets on this administration. Now, look, I know we've kind of both given up trying to predict what Donald Trump is and isn't going to do, but we're down to what, the last 24, 36 hours of this administration? What do you think that's going to look like in reality?
Well, it does feel, Tom, a bit like the last days of a Roman emperor. Legions on the streets, the citizens are worried about the future of the Republic. We do have a better sense now of the timeline. We expect tomorrow he will issue at least, maybe more than 100 presidential pardons, not, we're told, to himself and his family, but to friends and associates. And on Wednesday morning, he will, approximately at 8:30, he will be on Marine One, fly to Andrews Air Force Base, and there have a final formal departure ceremony. He then goes to Mar-a-Lago in Florida. But, Tom, very obviously, this is not the end of the Trump drama. There is obviously a Senate trial on that impeachment charge of inciting an insurrection. It's not at all clear if 17 Republicans will cross the aisle and vote for conviction. If they do, there can then be a majority resolution to bar him from federal office going forward. But you can just imagine how further polarizing the trial of America's 45th president would be. And for Donald Trump and his supporters, I think they would welcome it because it keeps them part of this very fraught national conversation.
OK, Robert, for now, thank you very much indeed. And I'll be here on Wednesday with Robert and Kanisha and many others to bring you President Biden's inauguration live on ITV. Our special programme starts at 4 o'clock UK time. If you'd care to join us, that's President Biden, the inauguration, on Wednesday at 4. Should be fascinating, so please do. Set your alarm clocks. Now, to today's other news back home. And there was, it has to be said, some pretty large progress on vaccinations. Just over 4 million people have now had their first dose. So many over 80s have been done in some parts of the country, in fact, that the over 70s are now being called up. And 10 more mass vaccination centres opened across England.
There might not be any horses running on Taunton's track, but there's never been a more important race here. One of 10 new mass vaccination centres, like St Helens Rugby Ground, where sport has given way to syringes, or as in Blackburn's Cathedral, where empty chairs are now waiting for a congregation of the most vulnerable. Jabs are being given across the country at the rate of 140 per minute, each one life-changing for those whose lives are most at risk from COVID.
Well, I want to see the grandchildren and my sons and my granddaughter and having a cuddle off them all.
And what's that going to mean to you to do that after all this time?
It means a heck of a lot. You'd be crying her eyes out the whole time, as she is now, just thinking about it.
The vaccination programme is going at such pace that it's being opened up to the over 70s and the clinically extremely vulnerable, as the Prime Minister, visiting a vaccine manufacturer today, set out.
We're now done more than half of the over 80s, almost half of the people in care homes, the elderly residents of care homes. Those groups remain a top priority Don't forget, they're an absolute priority for us. But it's right, as more vaccine comes on stream, to get it into the arms of the other groups in the JCVI list.
Over 4 million people in the UK have been vaccinated so far. The government says by mid-February, 15 million people in the top 4 priority groups will have been offered the vaccine, including care home residents and staff, health workers, all over 70s and the clinically extremely vulnerable. However, there are big regional variations in vaccination rates. And what is the reason that some areas are doing so much better than other areas? Is it because they're not getting sufficient supplies of the vaccine, or is it because they're less well organised?
There's all sorts of reasons. It does take time to set up each of the sites, because each site has to be approved, because you want to make sure that firstly it's safe in terms of people going into the site. But the key thing about the goal that we've set by the 15th of February is that everybody in the top 4 groups will be offered a vaccine by then.
For those like Sean who've been shielding since March, getting the vaccine would change everything. But he's yet to be told how those housebound like him will be protected.
We are concerned that housebound patients will be left waiting for the vaccine. This is what happened to me with the flu vaccine, and I am worried it will happen again.
There are issues like that to be ironed out, but the vaccine programme is a longed-for dose of good news, each syringe inching us closer to a way out. Romilly Weeks, News at 10.
But that way out is still some way off. In the past 24 hours, there have very sadly been another 599 deaths. Now, that figure is always on a Monday, but today's was a fifth higher than last Monday. And the next few weeks could be the worst yet for deaths. That's because there are now more people than ever before in hospital with the virus, 37,500 in all. All this week, our health editor, Emily Morgan, will be reporting from hospitals at the limits of their capacity or indeed beyond them. Some have already had to send their intensive care patients elsewhere, like Watford General. They have more younger patients now, and as one intensive care matron told us, families are being wiped out.
We have lost some young people. We've lost people that we shouldn't have lost.
We have perhaps become accustomed to this, seeing patients extremely ill with COVID. What we're not perhaps accustomed to is the age of those patients. This man is 33. No underlying health conditions, but now on a ventilator, not knowing whether he'll get to live the life he hoped for.
How are you feeling?
A few days along, Rob writes me a note.
Been in a long time. I am slowly getting better.
He's had a tracheotomy after coming off a ventilator and can't speak. He's just 48.
What do you miss most? Has this been hard? You miss them?
I'm just going to have a feel of how your chest is feeling this morning.
Staff at the Watford General have no doubt this wave is worse than the first.
Seeing a lot younger people this time. We're seeing families. We're having families coming in, and we're seeing families being wiped out, which is just so soul-destroying.
They're going to transfer him. Lovely. Fine.
Patients have never been turned away here, but making room has, at times, become impossible.
Since New Year, 18 patients have had to be transferred to other hospitals across the country, some as far as Nottingham and Leicester. That's extremely rare, but they're so desperate for space in this intensive care unit to make room for patients to come up from the acute ward.
52, 52, 52, 46. These are my grandparents on the ward here. These are school-aged children's mums and dads on this ward.
And these patients are very aware of what is going on in this acute ward. Some are too frightened to be ventilated, even if they need it.
It's very hard. You've been sitting in a bed looking out to the ward and seeing patients die. I can't imagine how harrowing that is for a patient. And we've had families witness that. Sons witness parents die in here.
It was tough. It was really tough.
From his bed, John has watched many die. He nearly gave up, but staff didn't.
They kept me going when I didn't want to keep going.
Both John and his wife were admitted to hospital at Christmas. She's now waiting for him at home. He just wants to get back too and leave the horrifying roll call of deaths he's witnessed behind. Emily Morgan, News at 10 at Watford General Hospital in Hertfordshire.
Oh God, these scenes from hospital remain absolutely brutal. Now, for many of those who've lost jobs and earnings during the pandemic, the special £20 uplift in universal credit has been vital. The government has so far refused to say whether it will be extended beyond April. Tonight, Labour and 6 rebel Conservative MPs put pressure on the government to keep it going. The Prime Minister had told his side to abstain.
The ayes to the right, 278. The noes to the left, 0. So the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Unlock.
This evening's vote is not in fact binding, but compared to a year ago, nearly twice as many people now receive universal credit. The extra £20 has, of course, been a lifeline.
Tony makes the best of the hand he's been dealt. He spends his days delivering leaflets.
So how much do you get paid per leaflet, Tony?
Essentially, each leaflet is worth 11 pence to us. It can effectively be worth £50 a day.
It does not deliver an income Tony can live on. But with universal credit, he can at least rent a flat.
Oh, Shmuel, come out.
A small space he shares, including with his fiancée, Sue.
Hi, Sue.
Hiya.
Her disability means she can't work. Neither can afford to lose £1,000 a year.
We're just going to end up deeper trying to to pay Paul. What do we do? Do we pay that gas bill, electric bill, or do we eat?
We don't live an extravagant lifestyle.
No, I mean...
We just about exist.
But you don't want that fight to be any harder, really, do you?
No, and this is why we don't want that little bit of help taken away. It is wrong.
Tony and Sue are among the 6 million or so people now on universal credit. The number has pretty much doubled during the pandemic. It captures people who never conceived of needing benefits before, who've fallen further than they'd ever feared. And amid all of that uncertainty, they at least want the surety that their safety net won't shrink.
This family never had to worry about the contents of their fridge until the pandemic. As MPs discuss whether the country can afford universal credit, it's not a debate this household ever imagined having to entertain.
It's hard. I mean, it's a thing that people would imagine probably that most estate agents are not going to need to be on universal credit, but because I'm doing reduced hours, my wife is furloughed, we're using this extra money to cover things like food for the kids to go to nursery, to pay bills.
A decision's due in the March budget about whether to cut universal credit. For those who remember life before the pandemic, there is one aspect they don't wish to return to. Paul Brand, News at 10.
All right, well, let's move on to another long-running subject now. And the Prime Minister met business leaders today to discuss the opportunities of Brexit and to set up a new business council to make the most of them. He says he wants frank feedback from them. Well, we have some for him. Figures we've obtained say 150,000 businesses, large and small, that trade online with the EU are struggling to make money because of unexpected tariffs and charges.
Awesome Books isn't finding Brexit very awesome. Last year, the online retailer sent £4 million of books from its warehouse near Oxford to customers across the European Union. This year, it's charging buyers in the EU more because of new customs costs, and it's losing sales as a result.
I think it's a big deal that when you go and find a book on the typical websites you'd go and buy from, you tend to have a look at the price and, you know, if there's 50 pence or £1 or even £2 difference, why would you pay more when you could pay less?
Since the 1st of January, the cost of shipping the Lego encyclopedia to a customer in Germany has gone from £2 to £6 because of the new customs clearance rules, which means the VAT paid on the book has also risen to almost £3, meaning the overall price the customer pays in Germany has gone from just over £31 to almost £36 for the book, an increase of 15%. Now that Brexit is done, all UK exporters to the EU, including those who trade on platforms like Amazon and eBay, have to contend with customs declarations and in many cases VAT registrations and tariffs on the goods they dispatch. Neither Amazon nor eBay could tell us how many of their sellers are out of pocket. This VAT advisor thinks it's around 150,000. Who's been hit hardest by the new rules?
It's the small businesses that are trading on the big marketplaces, Amazon, eBay, Etsy. They're the ones who are having to cope with all this paperwork, all these extra taxes. They're just not set up for it. And so they're going to be losing business to the European competitors.
That's what's happened to Kiddimax in Blackpool. The toys it sells online in the EU are mostly made in China and now attract tariffs. Sales in France, Germany, Italy and Spain have collapsed.
A little bit annoyed, really. It's obviously you have mixed emotions. You know, you start worrying, but then at the end of the day, you've just got to really push forwards and just find a way around it.
The government admits businesses face teething problems now we've left the EU's customs union and its single market, and says it will help them to adapt to the new rules. But the paperwork and the extra costs are here to stay. Joel Hills, News at 10.
They've played together for Manchester United and, of course, for England. And now Phil Neville and David Beckham are to be reunited on this side of the Atlantic, America, on the sidelines this time. Neville has left his role as the manager of England's women's football team to become head coach at Beckham's Major League Soccer side, Inter Miami. Neville wasn't supposed to leave, yet his replacement, Dutch coach Serena Wiegman, was due to take over in July. Finally, from here, it would be wrong to think there is only anxiety about what will happen on Wednesday. There is hope, too, among Democrat supporters for a change of direction, for a different kind of America. And the inauguration of Kamala Harris as Vice President will represent some of that hope and some of that change. In days gone past, many vice presidents were officials of little influence and no consequence. Shadowy white men drifting through the hallways of power unless thrust into the limelight by the demise of their presidents. But now we have a new kind of history maker.
You ushered in a new day for America.
Kamala Harris becomes the first woman, the first South Asian. Her partner, Doug, the first second husband. She is all too aware of what that means.
But while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last. Because every little girl watching tonight sees that this is a country of possibilities.
Some of her oldest friends say this is a moment of huge significance, not just for America, but for women all over the world.
When we're thinking about this, when we're thinking about VP Harris, we're thinking about a woman that's not just inspiring doctors in LA right now saving lives or nurses saving lives. We're thinking about the women in the remote villages of India. We're thinking about the women in refugee camps in Jordan. We're thinking about the women in concentration camps in China. Those are the people. She's going to be inspiring every single woman that didn't feel like she can make it, that she will have hope and she will be the light.
But Vice President Harris's influence will stretch far beyond the role of mere symbol. For one thing, Joe Biden has made the same promise he received from Barack Obama, that she will be the last person in the room when he makes a decision. But there is another factor. The Democrats' victory in the Georgia runoffs means that for the next 2 years at least, the Senate is split 50-50. Vice President Harris has the casting vote. Or to put it another way, no legislation reaches his desk without her explicit approval. Could she be President Harris one day? And if so, what kind of women will we come to know? Down to earth, loyal, funny, say her friends.
She has an incredible sense of humor. I think that's come out. I think people have seen that side. I think people can see her intellect, that it comes out in wit.
Vice President Harris has her enemies, of course. Too liberal, say some. Much too conservative, as a California prosecutor say the left of her party. But of one thing we can be sure. She is a woman who will more than make her mark. And that is it for tonight from Washington. I'll be here same time tomorrow. Do join me then. For now, good night. Thanks very much for watching.